Welcome to the Innovation Imperative, a legal podcast for startups, founders, and venture capital investors navigating the legal issues that shape emerging companies. In each episode, we share practical, business-minded legal insights to help you close deals, manage risk, and stay ahead as your business evolves. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the Innovation Imperative. My name is Patrick Driscoll, and I'm the Director of Client Development for Emerging Companies and Venture Capital at Holland & Knight. At Holland & Knight, I work closely with founders, venture capital firms, and investors navigating the full life cycle of innovation, from company formation and early fundraising through growth, scaling, and ultimately exit. A big part of our role sits at the intersection of law, capital, and storytelling, helping innovators and investors think strategically about how they build, fund, and protect what they're creating. The Innovation Imperative is really about that journey. Each episode, we sit down with founders, investors, and operators who are shaping the future, often behind the scenes, to unpack the real stories, lessons learned, and inflection points that don't always show up in a pitch deck or press release. We focus on VC, startups, and the decisions that matter most when the stakes are high. Today's conversation is one I'm particularly excited about. It's a practical, forward-looking conversation on cybersecurity and software supply chain risk, focused on how founders, investors, and enterprises can build secure, scalable technology businesses. Topics include the founding story of ReversingLabs, shifts in modern threat detection, what investors should look for in security platforms, and how legal and compliance strategies support growth in regulated and enterprise-focused markets. Joining me first is Jeff Seul, my colleague and partner at Holland & Knight. Jeff is a partner who focuses on working with technology companies and investors on complex legal and strategic issues, especially as companies scale and face increasingly sophisticated risks. He brings a thoughtful, pragmatic perspective to these conversations, and he'll be helping guide today's discussion alongside me. We're thrilled to be joined by our guest, Mario Vuksan. Mario is the co-founder and CEO of ReversingLabs, a company widely recognized as a leader in cybersecurity and threat intelligence. So with that, Jeff, let's get started.
Excellent. Thanks, Patrick. And Mario, it's really great to be with you. We've known each other a long time. I've seen the long arc of your journey. For those who are just meeting you, maybe you could give us the flyover, the 90-second version of your path, and focusing on what experiences got you interested in cybersecurity and risk and how you think about it.
So, Jeff, I was really always very excited about building technology, something that's new, something that has a chance of changing how we do things. And in my trajectory, I was always looking for that next level of challenge. And as you well know, we had lots of great challenges at Group Networks some, 25 plus years ago. And from my perspective, a lot of the lessons learned that are still with us today. My first deep dive onto the latest technologies that can manage tremendous amount of data. Back in the day, it was Microsoft SQL Server technology that was rapidly displacing Oracle in those days from many different places, and something that has started to open up space for a lot of new radical ideas. Of course, that was not the only element that was important at the Groove. It's really sort of the place where the privacy, encryption, the security became the first-class citizen from the security perspective that I remember seeing in my career. Now, that sort of experience did follow me later on to Bit9, where we tried to build next generation, very innovative security company. And I tried to put together this knowledge and skills into a trust repository that was really put together before trust was the thing for all of us. Actually, we were literally using these large repositories as an inverse filter, really just to say, is something not good and therefore is potentially bad and we should do something about it, which eventually got very much used for digital forensics. But today's sort of focus on being able to understand how our critical infrastructure can best serve us, when can we trust it, when do we replace it. Those ideas were coming further down the pipe.
You've seen a lot over the days. That's quite an arc of history in the industry around cybersecurity. I remember the first conversation around founding ReversingLabs, but what I can't remember clearly is what was the specific sort of inflection point that made you decide that you needed to found a company to do what you're doing as opposed to just continuing on as the world-class engineer that you are?
those are interesting moments. Maybe for some people, they happen in overnight, just like where you wake up and say, I want to do this. I think for many people, these things are gradual, building up in you. I was always very much interested in engineering. I majored in math and computer science, but as you know, I also majored in art history. I was very much interested in how different information influences technology and the other way around. I always viewed it as being one part of the much larger, more important whole for society in general. Anyway, for large chunks of history, art was tied with religion, with warfare, with science, with medicine. Certainly, like Leonardo was engineer and artist at the same time. There was really no clear differentiation between, what society may need. And of course, when we build something, the care comes with it. You want it to feel good. You want to feel proud of the achievement. You want it to last long. I mean, a lot of architects building bridges took tremendous amount of care how they visually appear. And therefore, for me, it was very important to apply myself into something where I have deep belief about what I'm doing, where I end up having the freedom to see through the end. And that's sort of the beautiful thing about building things. You build it, you may eventually have a chance to see how other people react to what you have built. At least for me, it gives the pride of responsibility for my actions. Something where I believe I had a good idea, we built something, there was a great reaction. And I think that's wonderful, sort of the meaning of life, the ability to build what new technology brings.
That's really interesting and beautiful. I don't think I've ever heard anyone put it quite that way, but it's a creative impulse. It's not just about the engineering, it's about creating something beautiful, impactful, the whole package. And you have to meet a market, right? I guess the architect building the bridge is doing that too. People want to cross the river. As you think about the market at the time, what was like the critical gap that others weren't addressing, that you sort of decided to direct your creativity toward?
You mean specifically from a perspective of cybersecurity?
Yeah, I mean, as I recall, you'd been ideating on a suite of really interesting technologies and you sort of directed them towards an initial set of problems. Like, what were others getting at the time that you were getting and Reversing Lab began to address?
Yeah, so when we started the company, it was very, very interesting. So 2008, bad economic crisis, not so much focused on early funding new ideas, but depending on who you ask, maybe the best time to start something new. Time where you can sort of, focus on the next generation ideas, where things were moving. And we felt that the ideas, the last ideas, is usually sort of things that propel you further at Bit9 were ideas that were not fully allowing us to actually solve the challenges that industry was facing. And at the time, the industry, I would probably call it first generation security industry. You had a lot of companies that went public where a lot of technology was being built with limited resources, even in big companies. And there was a lot of items left unsolved. Now, that was sort of opportunity, obviously, for the next generation of attackers to come through. There was almost a docile element that criminal actors were probably the one thing that we should be worried about. It's more the nuisance, uptime, making sure the PCs work. And it really was not until the nation state actors got into the game with advanced persistent threats that industry realized that everything they've been building is not sufficient, is not going to solve what their customers are expecting. I mean, there was a total belief before 2008 that my security investment is the provenance of the IT. It's just something you buy and you don't worry about it. The fact that you need to start hiring executives to deal with these problems, build programs, hiring intelligence folks to look through your alerts and look at those parties that may be interested in stealing things from you. That was generally rather new as a concept. And so we had this feeling. We obviously had no idea what is going to come. I mean, this is sort of like nobody really knew how strong, especially Chinese and the Russians, are going to go after the US infrastructure. We just realized that the answer is being provided. The whack-a-mole approach, the traditional AV, simply is just too manual. It's certainly not scaling. And even at Bit9, we realized that the whole trick of tracking files using their cryptographic hash values is just too fragile to be truly useful. So we set ourselves to solve this. We're going to have to research. There'll be lots of creativity. They'll be looking into unknown. There'll be effectively taking this digital world, shining some light, looking in areas there is no documentation. Also, think of it, open source was very early days, so like whatever you had in an open source was in its very early phases, documentation, conferences. A lot of these things are yet to come. So when it came to really understanding what some binary code could possibly do, it was as good as attempting to decode the alien space signals, coming from
Yeah.
galaxies.
You're describing a kind of dizzying array of new developments. I mean, from hybrid warfare to the rise of sophisticated cyber criminality to shifts in the tech industry itself, like open source. That's a lot to cope with and a lot of problems to solve, a lot of room for creativity. What did the first 6 months look like? Take me back there. I can't recall, like, building a team, early customer contact, and so forth.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I mean, when you start a company, obviously you want to have a sense that you're on good grounds of being successful. You know the problem as a user, consumer. You intimately know what's wrong so you can help. Also, if you're not 100% sure, you should be able to intimately figure out how you could get to answers or how to find people who will lead you towards that solution, what you can make different. And in our particular case, we were unique from a perspective that I knew most of our potential early customers from the industry. I knew their problems, there was a mutual respect, and I knew that the challenge was providing them with a solution for the problem that their organizations were trying to solve, but also doing it in terms that are difficult to ignore. So this meant come back with a lot more value than they were able to do or generate internally themselves. Effectively tell them, I'm going to take something really difficult that is going to be very hard for you to staff. Everybody's smart, everybody can do everything. But if there is a personal trust, we can build something to solve the problem that is not the thing you run after every day. And those are sort of our first few contracts. Those are the sort of items that gave us the chance to build the first version of the product, second version of the product. And then as you start talking to people what you're doing, you get some awards, people talk about you, you get called back. And this was at the moment a unique and crazy idea that was definitely not, consumer focused, but really targeting the most sophisticated organizations.
I remember those days, yeah. And I think it's really important to underscore what you're saying about the opportunity young companies have when they can partner with customer prospects as you did to really, build things that are guided by their requirements. And it's a sort of reciprocal loop. Well, let me shift a bit and let's talk a bit about the cybersecurity landscape and what Reversing Labs is laser focused on today. What do you think teams in customer organizations or customer prospects know and don't know, I guess, about software supply chain security? What are common misunderstandings about how software is developed, managed, secured these days?
Well, when it comes specifically to software supply chain security, there's lots of confusion and misunderstanding what it is. On one hand, people thinking it's a governance issue. It's pen and paper checkbox items. You give me a list of questions to answer, I do it, and then you store it, and hopefully something comes out of that along the way. That's great. I mean, it allows companies to deal with regulators and regulatory environments, but it's not a fix. Now, those that are really considering a fix, at best do what today in security call application security segment of the market, where you believe that there's some kind of a scanner. You scan usually source code, have some findings, have the vendor do it, and that's an easy fix. Now, the challenge here is that simplifying the problem to let's scan the source code, which is usually text, so like in a much easier version of the problem, or subjecting any included open source to evaluation and ignoring everything else as it usually happens, that's really not sufficient. The reality is that the most critical software is there because we cannot remove it and replace it. It has aged, needs overhaul, modernization, careful scrubbing down, something that takes a long time to address, and something that is there for us until something significant happens. And this is sort of where we strongly believe that significant efforts between those using, acquiring software, and willing parties that want to improve their software needs to take place. Just assume not everybody is really incentivized or wants to fix something that it took so much pain to build some 10, 20 years ago. But unfortunately, we need to go down this path.
Right. Where do you see companies underinvesting in security generally?
Well, I mean, that obviously depends on the company. So today, most organizations have a chief information security officer running their problems, and they do just try to solve that problem. However, it has become super complex problem that naturally takes lots of money, lots of skills. Some of them are more technical and others have more legal or finance skills. But also it will take time and focus that lead towards a situation that something will be out of the focus or needing additional investment. But one thing that I would want to highlight for all the organizations looking for how to enhance their security programs is to really focus on critical resilience. Assume that they will be at some point subject to a catastrophic attack. This will happen. Maybe you're lucky, it hasn't happened. Maybe you get to move from job to job, but something unfortunately is waiting there. Now, the critical thinking that needs to happen is what do you need to do to assure that your company can operate the next day? Because that's usually what's required from our IT organizations. We understand that servers can burn, things get corrupted, but we need to work tomorrow. And if we don't, our customers may not get served. And those customers may have critical, if not life-threatening dependency on what we do. And so if you as a CISO cannot ensure that organization can operate the next day, I mean, that can have severe business, personal, and societal impact.
So looking 3 to 5 years out, what is changing fastest in the security domain? What are you focused on for the future?
With the AI in the hindsight, no one really could have predicted how quickly things can move. But when it comes to actual security response, attackers and defenders will always be playing a sophisticated game of cat and mouse, with or without AI, agents, or the like. The goal will always be to get as fast as possible to a position of advantage at the lowest possible cost. Even with AI, it's just sort of the cheapest path to getting things done, which then sort of allows the other side to respond at equal pace. It's the same thing for defenders. We're going to do the fastest, easiest, cheapest way to address the need, not like some sort of massive regularly overhaul and something else that may take 10, 20 years to come to fruition.
Interesting. Yeah, AI is really changing the game everywhere, but I guess people are going to use it for good as well as to defend against the threats that AI can be used to generate. Yeah.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, the way we are as a society, one's use of technology may be positive and another one may be considered negative. And this is
Yeah.
sort of outside pure, clear, fraudulent, malicious use cases.
Shifting gears again, what advice would you give early founders of cybersecurity companies? What are one or two things they need to know before they launch and really try to scale and go to market and follow in your footsteps?
I mean, it's simple and yet, tremendously complicated. You literally have to define a problem that's, worth solving and that the customers feel is worth talking about. And if you do not have that match, it's just something exciting, more in art, less engineering. And I think
Yeah.
you really need something that people can take, make their own, and create further value on top of what you've just created.
Super important to know the difference between whether you've built a feature, whether you've built a product, or whether you've got a company there.
Right. So those are things that happen on the trajectory. If you can't even design a feature that makes sense, it's kind of hard to get to the conversational product or the wherewithal of building a company. I would recommend people not to stress and be proud of one thing, see results, and then see where that takes you.
Right.
Usually new ideas come at every different stage. And I think that's sort of a beautiful element of building a company. You never quite know where some business plan will take you. And I mean, I think it's just like your life, you got to live it to enjoy it.
So, one last question. How does having a strong legal partnership with lawyers impact growth of a company like yours, and I'm sort of thinking less about the nuts and bolts and blocking and tackling and stuff, but sort of strategic value.
I think having a good legal partner is essential and critical for any fledgling company. And you really want a partner that has the ability to help you in many areas all at once, because contracts are very, very important, are not the only element that matter. So I would really recommend new founders to think hard. First, build a relationship, trust with an organization that has breadth and gravitas, organization that would be able to see the totality of your company, from contracts to patents to different privacy, open source licensing issue, that will be able to give advice as the company is growing, potentially bring in the resources in different geographies, whether commercial, federal, where organization that may even, in our cases, like we probably need security advice from a perspective of we are building security products. What do you think? What are you hearing from the regulatory perspective? But I could imagine that there will be organizations that need more differentiated services that we haven't tapped into. And from my perspective, Jeff, working with you and Holland & Knight has been a real privilege, knowing that no matter what happens, there will be very strong bench of people being able to assist us. And as you know, we've utilized all kinds of services within the firm over the years.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I appreciate you saying that. It really underscores what we see. We see time and again how important it is for a young company that may have a focus, sort of narrow focus here initially. As they scale, things change. They have customers in other industries where you need that industry expertise. Stuff comes up where you need specialists, and breadth and depth is super important. So you got to think about the future, I think, when you make these choices, for sure. That's all I got. Patrick, I wonder whether you have any questions having heard all this.
I could probably talk for another hour with Mario here, but we do have to wrap up, unfortunately. But before we do, I did want to double click on some of the three practical takeaways that I found to be insightful. And the first one, I think, was made clear throughout the conversation, which is to know the problem if you're building the company, like truly in-depthly understand the problem that you're trying to solve and make sure that it's scalable and it's, again, not a feature. It's an actual company that you're building around the product. So I enjoyed the conversation there. The second one is to build from conviction, not trends. So I enjoyed that you were, Mario, blending your deep technical expertise with kind of creativity. You talked about art history and thinking outside the box about cybersecurity. So believe in what you're actually building and you can bring real care and intentionality to it. So I appreciated that. And then the third one is to prioritize resilience over perfection. So you mentioned kind of the influx of AI into this mix. Everything is faster, cheaper, it's more persistent, and you need to really be able to adapt with solutions to deal with these threats. So there's no perfect checklist, there's no silver bullet, but you need to be nimble when you're building a company in the cybersecurity space. And your journey has been fascinating. So thanks again for sharing your thoughts and your insights. Jeff, as always, thanks for the great conversation and perspective. It's very clear you both have known each other for a long time, which makes these conversations super fun for me to sit in and listen to. If you want to learn more about Reversing Labs, you can check out their website, find out information on the work that they're doing to secure the software supply chain. For founders, investors, and funds navigating growth, governance, and risk, Holland & Knight is proud to support you in the innovation ecosystem. You can check us out at hklaw.com. You can find information about Jeff, myself, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thanks again so much to our speakers and to everyone listening. We'll see you next time on the Innovation Imperative. Thanks for listening to the Innovation Imperative. At Holland & Knight, we partner with startups, founders, and investors to deliver practical, business-minded legal guidance, helping you move forward with clarity and confidence. To learn more, connect with our professionals from today's episode or visit hklaw.com.